sit with you.
Okay, cool. Good? We're live? Oh gosh, we're live already. Oops. Hey everybody. I just want to welcome everybody to our event today. And I'm looking around and seeing all these amazing faces of everybody coming together in our community for this amazing market week. It's going to be such Oh, it's okay. It's going to be such an amazing time just getting to know each other this week as we all come together. And my name's Amy Danette Deal. I run a small brand here in Santa Fe called 4KINSHIP. A lot of our work is really just connecting with community, being good listeners. Asking you guys to all join us today was part of that idea of just spending time together off our phones, you know, out of our crazy events that we're all going to be part of this week, and really just have a discussion about some amazing new ideas and things that I hear from everyone that have come in the shop and asked us. And so, I don't know, it's going to be an amazing day here in Santa Fe. I've got my favorite uncle next to me who has been part of some of our events this year, and I feel that James has been such an inspiration on so many levels as a creative, as a community leader, as someone who has really just shown the world how expansive and creatively brilliant we are. So I'm so honored to have him join us today at this event. It's going to be a beautiful hour or so that we all get to hang out together. So I'm going to hand over the mic to James.
Right. Thanks, Amy. Let's give Amy a round of applause, everybody. Danse, James Jones, Nisega San, Nehiao Nia, Talkri First Nations, Ochania, Kisa Manatal, Isa Nanaskamau Ihi. Hello, beautiful people. Hello, everyone. My name is James Jones. I am from Talkri First Nations, which is a community located in northern Alberta, Treaty 8 territory. And I'm really excited to be here. This is the first time that I've been here in Santa Fe during this time where all the creatives and all the artists kind of come out, and I'm excited to see a lot of dancers, designers, just all kinds of really dope creative natives out here. So it's really an honor for me to be here and just kind of share a little bit of my personal story with everyone here today. And I'd just like to thank Amy again for always just being really supportive and you know, being really supportive and reaching out. And she's always, her and 4KINSHIP and you know, a lot of people from out here and the people she works with always are just very you know, even just the messages you guys send, aside from, you know, the work and stuff we do of just checking in and stuff like that, I really appreciate that. So just want to say thank you, hi, Kaninaskamoten, for that. I'm just going to share a few words about my personal journey as an artist. I feel like I have kind of a pretty crazy journey as an artist, coming from you know, Talkri First Nation. So I grew up personally in a really small community. We only have just maybe under 1,000 band members. And my community is very, very, I guess you could say, bushed. You know, we don't have cell phone towers. For the longest time, we didn't have roads. We don't have a store or anything like that. So, you know, we're kind of separated from, you know, the city or even towns. I think the closest town is maybe like about 2 hours away. A small town called High Level is the closest town to us. But, you know, so growing up, I never really knew much about, you know, artists. I didn't know much even about my own personal culture. I think my story is very similar to probably a lot of natives even here, that, you know, my mom and a lot of people from my family went to residential schools when they were kids. So, you know, I'm pretty sure most of us kind of know how that story goes. I wasn't taught a lot of our cultural things growing up, you know, like our language. I wasn't taught about our ceremonies. I wasn't taught about, you know, our songs or anything like that. And, you know, I'm not angry about that. I understand a lot of those things like that happened to my parents and happened to, you know, my grandmother in residential school. So I do understand. I forgive, you know, for not sharing that part with me. But I also feel that it was my duty later in life to learn those things and kind of take them upon myself. But I'll start off with kind of how I got started as an artist. So I think I was like, 6, 7 years old. I kind of remember growing up. Like we didn't have a Blockbuster. We didn't even have like cable TV, but we had 3 not cassette tapes. Wait, not DVDs. What are the VHS? There we go. I'm like, man, it's been so long since I used those. I didn't even remember what they were called. We had 3 VHS tapes growing up in my house, and I remember them really clearly because we only had 3, so we watched them like 1,000 times. The first one we had was Jason, which was really scary because there was a lake like right by my house. So it double freaked me out. I remember that very, very vividly. The second one we had was Back to the Future. And then the third VHS tape we had was Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. And I don't even know how I got a hold of that tape, but we had it. And it kind of just really, I don't know what it was, but like when I seen people dance, that style, like the hip hop style, or the street dance style. For some reason, it just kind of inspired me. I don't know, like I felt something. I felt like my spirit move in a certain way when I would watch these people dance. And of course, the moonwalk and all that stuff was something that I just thought looked cool. So like I wanted to try it. So I could remember me being like, 7, 8 years old. We had gravel roads at that time in my community, so I'd be on the gravel, like trying to do the moonwalk, like down on my res, and wherever I'd go, I'd always try out these moves and stuff like that. So for me, I always, I don't know, shared a love for dance. It just always moved me in a certain type of way. So when I was 11, 12 years old, is when I moved to Edmonton, Alberta. It's the capital of our province in Canada, and I moved out there when I would say I think 11 is when we first moved to the city. And for me, I was so excited to move to the city, because I don't know, when you come from a small community, when you come from very small res, and you kind of in some way you really want to be like a city native. I don't know if I can explain it, but for me, I was like, man, I can't wait to be a fancy city native, get out of here, move off, and gonna do all these things, and wear all these fancy clothes and stuff like that. For us, that's kind of what we dream of, as kids coming from the north, right? And it's funny because today, we all kind of want to go back to our communities and spend time outside. But when you're from that, you kind of that's what you're inspired to be. So I was really excited to move to a city, be a big city native. But my experience was quite different than what I thought it was going to be, because for us, as a family, whenever we'd go to the city as little res kids, for us it was always really fun, right? We'd go to the mall. We'd be going to these big events with rides and shops. So I was always really inspired to go to the city, and it was always a really fun time. But when we moved there, as a family, it was quite different. I experienced things that I never experienced, at home. One of the things I experienced right away, especially going to a non-native school, a Catholic school, was just really severe racism. Right away off the hop, racism from a lot of the other kids, even from some of the teachers. I felt right away there was something that I felt like I didn't fit in, So that was really tough for me, that change, moving to the city. Another thing that I experienced as well is I felt a lot of racism even within our healthcare system, whenever I'd go to the doctors, or whenever I had really extreme anxiety growing up, I had panic attacks and stuff like that, and I felt like whenever I was dealing with doctors or whatever, I was always kind of just pushed away. I felt like they just didn't really care about my story or about my health and stuff like that. So also, I'll share with you an experience I had my first time moving to the city. This was 3 months after moving to the city when I was 12 years old. It was my first experience with the local police. So I was just really into running. I wanted to I love running. I don't know what it was, but I love to run and just work on my physical well-being as a young person. And my first experience with the police was really different. And it was crazy because when I was young, people would always ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I'd always say I want to be a police officer. You know, I want to protect people. I want to do all these things. That was like my thing. So my first experience with the police was quite different than what I thought it was going to be. So I was running near my house, and what had happened was I don't know. I was just wearing like a black sweater, hoodie, some black joggers, and I was on my way just to go for a run, and the police, they kind of pulled up to me, and they pulled up right on the curve, like really close to me, and they drew their guns on me, and they threw me down on the cement, and they hit my head. They grabbed my hair because I had long hair, so they grabbed my hair and they kind of smashed my head against the cement, and started calling me all these racist names and asking me where I was running to and stuff like that. So that was my very first experience I had with the police in Alberta, or in Edmonton, in the city. So for me, I would say, like, one of the big things about my personal journey is, like, I never really felt like I fit in anywhere, especially in the city. Like, I never felt like the institutions were built for me personally. I never felt like I fit in school. I never felt like I fit in with the justice system. I never felt like personally I fit in with the healthcare system. I felt like all these institutions were just not built for me. So I just felt like, you know what, like, this is not for me, you know? And one of the places I did feel like I fit in was within the hip hop community, you know, within the dance community. That was the one place where I felt like people always had open arms, and they were always, didn't matter where you came from. It didn't matter what you look like, you know, your nation. You know, in the hip hop community, if you're dope, you're dope, you know, you're accepted. So I was really drawn to that, and that's why I think I continued with dance, and that's why I think I continued with on that journey in the arts. So, but I was also a really shy kid, like more shy, I think, than most. I don't know. I can't judge anyone, but for me, I was like one of the shyest kids ever. I don't know. I just had like zero confidence, and like I always had these like intrusive thoughts that like people were making fun of me, or people were, you know, saying mean things about me. And I think that kind of stemmed from just like all the racism I got throughout my years in like junior high and high school. So I always felt like that even when I was dancing. You know, I remember like getting ready to dance and like going to dance circle, and I would have these thoughts in my head of like, oh man, are people going to make fun of me? Are people going to say something about my hair? Are people going to, you know, like these thoughts kind of like held me back. And I'll share my very first dance experience with you. My first performance I got to do, there was a group in Edmonton. They were like a kind of like a performing group, and there were a variety performing groups. So where there was like so there was some rappers, there was DJs, there was like b-boys and b-girls, and I was asked to perform with them. And that was like maybe 1 year after I started dancing. I think I was 13 years old at the time. And I remember I was so nervous, but I was ready. I was like, hey, this is my first show. You know, I made it. I got to this point. I was so excited to perform with them, and it was just a small show at this like local little dance club we had. But I remember like right before my first performance, I was so nervous. I went and kind of hid in the bathroom, and I was like, I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to see anyone. And I went in the bathroom stall, like, on the toilet, and I just sat there. And all these, like, I was sweating, and like all these thoughts were going through my minds. You guys remember that movie 8 Mile? Like right before the rap battle, when he's like looking in the mirror and he's like, you know, throwing up, and like that was me. Like that's how I felt before my first performance. And I remember I remember perfectly, like my thought process was like, man, I don't want to go out there because what if I mess up? What if, you know, I fall and people make fun of me, and, you know, people say mean things about me? Like I always had that thought process of like, you know, what if I mess up? What if I do something wrong? You know, what if they don't like my moves? What if, you know, I always had these things in my head. And I actually didn't go out there. My very first show, I stayed in the bathroom the entire time that show went on. And I can remember, because they were calling me even on the mic. My buddy was like, anyone see James anywhere? Well, they were calling me by my b-boy name. I don't want to share it because it's like kind of embarrassing. Well, okay, I'll share it. My b-boy name was Mystical Man. So that was my very first name I gave myself. But They were calling me on the mic, and I didn't have it in me to go out there and perform in front of people. You know, I was so nervous. I was so scared that people were gonna say mean things, you know, about me and to me and stuff like that. So I just hid in the bathroom that whole time. And I remember after that show, I snuck out the back and I went home. I remember I said to myself, that's it. I'm not going to dance anymore. You know, I can't do this. Like, I don't want to be in front of people. I don't want to be judged by anyone. I don't want people to see, like, you know, who I am and what I can do. I just don't want to be a dancer, you know? So I quit dancing for a year after that. Never touched the dance floor, never went near it. And I remember I had this really good friend. His name was Leo Latender. He kept bothering me to, like, come dance. And I didn't want to, you know. I was like, no, I'm done. I don't want to be a dancer. Like, it's fine. And he invited me to a powwow. I had never been to a powwow at this point. And he said, you know what? Just come to a powwow this weekend. Come see a different kind of dance. Like, this is not the same as b-boying. It's a different vibe. You know, we're going to be around community. We're going to be around friends. We're going to be around family. No one's going to judge you. Like, just come check out a powwow. And I said, okay, I'll come with you. So I came to the powwow, and my friend actually had a plan for me because he really wanted me to start dancing. He goes, okay, I'm going to let you wear my regalia this weekend. And you don't worry about dancing and competition. He's like, just come in the grand entry with us. Come hang out, you know. And he's like, I really want you to experience this type of dance, you know, because at this point you've only been doing hip hop and you know, b-boying and stuff like that. But I really want you to just experience this. So, like, I remember walking into that powwow, my first time going to a powwow, and I remember just feeling like, I don't know, I felt like I was home, you know, like, I missed my home so much living in the city. But when I went to that powwow, I felt like that spirit of home was still there. And, you know, when I went out with all the other dancers, I put on his regalia and I went out. I remember being nervous, having those feelings, having those thoughts of, like, failure and, you know, what if people judge me and stuff like that. And also maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome because, like, I felt like I didn't belong in that space. You know, I never grew up to that point around culture. But when I got in there, you know, it was so amazing. So many people came up and shook my hand. So many people came up and said, "Hey, you're dancing. That's so cool. You're here. You're in your regalia. Like, I'm glad you're here." You know, people were generally happy for you to be there. So it was such a different vibe. And for me, that was kind of like a big changing point in my life and even in my dance career because I was like, wow, like, maybe this is the spirit of being an artist, you know, being supported, you know, being, you know, congratulated, you know, just having people have your back, you know, people watching out for you, people happy for you. And that's what I felt like when I was in that circle, and especially in that powwow circle. I felt like, you know, the true spirit of dance was with me, and it really fed my spirit. So at that time too, I didn't mention in my story, I was also, you know, doing a lot of drugs and alcohol at that time. I kind of fell into that, you know, in my early teen years living in the city. And I made a decision right after that first powwow. My friend said, "Hey, you know, I want you to keep dancing if you want. You can use my regalia. Like, I'm not going to be dancing with this summer." And I made a decision. I don't know what. I just felt weird personally, like, wearing my friend's regalia and wearing his eagle feathers and still using. Like, that's just me personally. I felt kind of weird doing that. So I made a decision. I said, okay, well, this summer I'm going to try not to drink or do drugs. You know, I'm going to try to stay away from that stuff because, like, I really want to like, honor this regalia and these feathers and stuff like that. So that summer, I didn't touch a drink of alcohol, didn't touch any drugs or anything like that. And by the end of summer, I actually felt really good. I felt healthy. I felt like, you know, a lot of my anxiety kind of went away after that summer. And I decided to, you know, just maybe extend it just a little bit, like a few more months, you know, no drinking, no drugs, no stuff like that. And yeah, it's, you know, it's pretty cool because that's when I was a teenager. You know, I'm in my later 30s now, and you know, I still haven't touched a drink of alcohol or drugs. You know, I've completely put that kind of behind me, and that's just me and my personal journey. Like, I don't judge anybody for what they want to do with their life, but I know for me, that was something that was really holding me back, you know, as just as a human being. It was substance, and, you know, was causing a lot of anxiety, causing a lot of, like, mental health issues. So for me, that was, like, a really big thing. And I think for me, that was probably the greatest gift at that time I could have given myself, was, like, the gift of sobriety. And it really pushed me to have a different thought process, as not just as being an artist, but like, not even as being a Nihio or indigenous person, but as a human being. It made me believe that, like, I could actually do more. I can actually, maybe succeed at this. I can actually maybe make a career out of this, and push me to really dive into the history of dance and the culture of dance and the spirit of dance. So for me, yeah, that was a really big thing. And like, I could tell every single person in here that, I don't know, like, I remember just thinking to myself, like, this was like a few years after learning about powwow and starting to perform and starting to get back on the road and stuff like that. I remember, like, there was this thought that, like, always would go through my mind, like, right before I would perform, I would always think to myself, like, those little thoughts of doubt would creep into my mind. Even today, honestly, like, I'm not gonna lie, it doesn't matter if I'm performing for like 10 people, 20, or like, 10,000. I still get really, really, really nervous before shows, and I still get those little tiny, like, thoughts of like doubt, like, creeping in and stuff like that. I still get those thoughts of, like, when I was younger about being rejected and people saying not the greatest things and stuff like that. But then I just remember, like, that why is it that I do this? Like, why do I dance? Like, why do I share? Why do I, tell stories? And it's for, a different purpose. It's to help. It's to, we say as dancers, like, especially as powwow dancers, like, we dance for all those who are not able to dance, stuff. And so I always think about that. And it helps me. It helps me, honestly, with performances. It helps me with speaking. It helps me, in lots of different parts of my journey. And, like, I always also think about, my family and my friends who are not here anymore, and, who are kind of watching down. And so for me, like, I feel like the spirit of being an artist really changed when I started just kind of changing my thought process and changing my thoughts of, like, the people who are even watching. Like, I went from, like right now, what I'm doing, I would not be able to do, like, when I was even in, like, my younger 20s. I'd be thinking, oh, who's judging me? Who's gonna say negative things about me? But even the thoughts I have now, like, I feel like I'm around family. I feel like I'm around my cousins. I feel like I'm around my friends. I feel like I'm supported, and those are the thoughts that I try to build off of. Those are the thoughts that I try to use even today, even with content. Like, when I started posting on social media, I personally got, like, a lot of hate and a lot of negative comments, not just even from, like, non-natives, but, like, people in our own community. I found, especially with TikTok and me, like, honestly, I've never really been, like, huge on social media. Like, I've never been, I don't know. I've always been kind of like a traditionalist and saying, like, oh, like, I don't care about TikTok or all this stuff like that. Like, I never aspired to, like, even be on these platforms. But my journey with social media has been an interesting one, and, like, I changed my thoughts on that as well. And when I first joined, like, social media, I remember asking my friend, this was my mentor, who's a hoop dancer, and he's the one who kind of took me under his wing and showed me hoop dancing and kind of showed me, like, the spiritual significance of it and stuff like that. And I remember asking him, like, calling him and being like, hey, man, do you think this is cool? Like, is it okay if I, like, post, like, hoop dancing on TikTok, And I remember him being like, yeah, man, like, why not? Like, you're sharing your story, and I remember him telling me that, just think of it as a storytelling tool. Us as, like, natives, as indigenous people, we've always been storytellers. For thousands of years, since time immemorial, we've been storytellers. We, most of our communities pass our teachings down orally. So he's like, just think of it as a storytelling tool. You're just sharing your story on there. So that's what really kind of helped me gain more confidence in posting on social media and just being able to share my story a bit more on there. And for me, one of the most rewarding things about using these platforms is that I get a lot of young indigenous youth who maybe grew up kind of the same way I did, like, not around a lot of culture, and just saying, hey, thank you, thank you for sharing these videos. Like, I didn't know this about powwow. I didn't know this about hoop dancing. I didn't know this about that. So like, for me, yeah, that's kind of like the reason why I still share on those platforms, and I still share my story on there. But even with that, like I said, there was not all the support was good, and I think a lot of people can kind of identify with that too. Is that like, no matter what you do, honestly, and this is a good teaching that was given to me quite a few years ago by one of my really respected elders that I learned a lot from. I remember talking to him about it and just saying like, man, why is there so many? Why is it so hard to get like support from our own community sometimes? Like. And then I remember him just giving me this really simple but good piece of advice, is that, you know what, like, you're not meant to be like best friends with everybody on your journey. People you meet in this life, you're gonna have disagreements. You're gonna see things a different way, and we're not always meant to be on the same path as everybody else. We all have our own journeys, but we all come from that same tree. We all come from that two-legged tribe, that human being tribe in the end. So you got to remember that, especially within your journey, that not everyone's going to agree with what you're doing, not everyone's going to support what you're doing, but that's why you have to really love yourself and support your own journey in a good way. And that's another good teaching that was given to me, and I would say probably one of the ones that helped me most in life is the teaching of sagitan. In my language, just means the teaching of love. And I just kind of want to end on that note and to tell you a little bit about what was taught to me. So like during 2000, I would say, I think 2011, 2012, 2013 was a really difficult time in my life. And just a lot of things were going wrong at that time. My father had passed away. I just got out of a long-term relationship. And I just left a group that I was like a part of for over 10 years. And for me, there was a lot of things happening in my life that was really, really difficult. But I was giving the teaching of love, the teaching of sagitan, and it really helped me in just so many ways. And I just want to share that with everybody here today, because it's really helped me, and if it can help you in any ways, that I just want to share that. So I was walking home. This was after a late dance practice. I was walking home, and I ran into one of my elders that I escapios for. Escapios just as an elder's helper in one of our lodges. And I remember it was like midnight. I was walking home, and she asked me, she goes, "James, my boy, how you doing?" And I remember I wanted to say that I was doing good, but I really wasn't. So I was just being honest. I was like, honestly, I'm not doing good. This person is really like pissing me off, and like, life sucks, and like I don't want to be here, and like, all these things. I started, dropping all my trauma and just like letting her know. And she goes, "You know what, James? I want to share something with you that was shared to me years ago. And you could take it however you want it, but I just want to share it with you." She goes, "Have you ever heard the teaching of sagitan?" And I said, "No." And she goes, "Well, it's the teaching of love. And this is what was told to me." She goes, in our community where we come from in the north, that kihiu, the eagle, is one of the teachers of love. It flies so high to creator that it experiences like that true love in its truest form. And when it comes back down to earth, comes back down to us, it brings that teaching of love with it. So each and every one of us can use it in our life in a way that we need to. And, for you and what you're feeling right now, like, I know you're hurt. I can feel your pain. I can feel your trauma. I can feel your grief. I can feel all these things when you're speaking. She goes, like, what are your thought process when you're thinking about these things? And the first thing that came into my head was hatred, anger, pain. Like, I hated so many people. I had so much anger inside of me, because so many people hurt me throughout my life. I didn't know how to deal with that. And that anger would just build and build and build, and I felt like it was growing. This big dark cloud was hanging over me. And she goes, "Well, have you ever sent yourself those things that are living inside of you, all these things that you talk about, the abuse you experienced, all the stuff you talk about, have you ever sent that love? Have you ever sent it sagitan?" And I said, "No, I haven't." She goes, "Well, I want you to go home tonight, and I want you to just send yourself a little bit of love. you might have to say it in the mirror. You might have to like almost vomit the words out because you don't feel it. But I want you to start saying it to yourself and just see how you feel. I want you to look inside of you. Look at those people who have hurt you. Look at all those grief and all the trauma that you carry with you. I want you to send that love. Send it sagitan. And come back to me in a week or 2 weeks and let me know how you feel. So I remember I went home that night. And, I went home and I remember, being home alone at night is like the worst time, right? You always, all these thoughts kind of come creeping into your head and you're not busy anymore. But I remember starting to feel like that again, like all this anger and pain coming up, by myself, a home. Sorry, mind if I talk a little longer? I remember thinking to myself about that teaching that was just given to me. Like maybe try sending myself just a little bit of love. Like maybe I'll feel better. And I didn't want to do it because I didn't love myself at that time. I hated myself. Like I looked in the mirror and I seen somebody that I didn't like. But I thought, you know what? What the heck? I'm just going to try it. So I physically went to the mirror and I looked at myself. And right away I seen, somebody I didn't like. I always thought I was ugly. I always thought I was this, I was that. But I remember looking at the mirror and just saying to myself, I love you. That was the very first time I ever said that in my life. Every first time I ever said that about myself. And I just said that in the mirror. And then I looked inside of myself and I had all these people and all these things that were causing me grief and pain. And I remember I would just try to send a little bit of love to each of those things. And, for the first time in months, maybe even a couple of years, I actually felt a little bit better. I'm not going to lie. Like I felt a little tiny bit better. And I started doing that, every day. When I wake up in the morning, I would send myself love. I would look in the mirror, tell myself I love myself. My whole day would go by. In the evening would come again. I would do the same thing over and over and over again. And I kid you not, like I'm being completely honest. Within like 2 weeks' time, I felt better and I felt more balanced than I had in the past 10 years, I felt so good. I started feeling good about myself. I started congratulating myself. I started, being supportive of my own journey, believing that I do deserve to be successful. I started believing that hey, you know what? Maybe we can fill these spaces. Maybe we do deserve to be here. And I kid you not, that teaching of Sagitan, that simple teaching of love was the best teaching and the best gift I was ever given. And, I believe that I'm still here today because of that teaching. So I just wanted to share that with everybody here, I know as an artist, as a creative, sometimes you can be really hard on yourself. And sometimes, it's really hard because you feel like you're not getting a lot of support, you're not getting a lot of love, you're not getting a lot of sagitan. But I think sometimes we have to be our own biggest supporters. We really do. And it's okay. As natives, we're always taught to be humble, but that doesn't mean you can't be happy for yourself. That doesn't mean you can't pat yourself on the back when you're doing something good, when you're doing something that's inspiring to you. So just always remember that. And if you're ever feeling like you don't feel a lot of that sagitan, a lot of that spirit, just try it. Try it one time and see how you feel. Look in that mirror, tell yourself you love yourself, look inside of you, send yourself as much sagitan and as love as you can, and just to see how it feels. For me, like I said, that was probably the greatest gift I ever gave myself, was allowing myself to just be free and, sending love to all those things that were hurting me. So with that, I just wanted to share a little bit of my journey. I want to thank everybody so much for just listening and just being deadly. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, Kanina Skamoten. Yeah, thank you. So I was going to end with a performance, but I know I'm a little over my time, but there's something I really wanted to do with everybody here today. Do it? Just give her? Okay. All right. So I guess I'll end with that. This is a little bit of my journey in a nutshell here. I kind of have my own little style with hoop dancing, and even with this style, I remember when I first started doing it, because I grew up, like I said, as a b-boy, as a hip-hop dancer. So like when I started blending this style together, I know there was like a lot of people, even like traditionalists and stuff like that, that probably weren't too fond of it. But it kind of grew over time, and it's really cool now because when I first started going to like the World Hoop Dance Championships, there wasn't a lot of, well, there was a lot of really creative things going on, but like there wasn't a lot of hip hop and outside influences like at the World Hoop Championships. My good friend Dakota Lawrence, who's with us, watching over us right now, he was one of the first ones to kind of bring that style to the World Hoop Dance Championships, and he was really into like popping and locking. He's one of the people who really inspired me to kind of bring my style of b-boying into the hoop dancing. And it's really cool now because like when you go and you see like all these little young hoop dancers, they're all doing handstands and doing the moonwalk and all this stuff. So it's really cool. Yeah, it's really cool to see. And it's, for me, like, I don't know, I just really, really love seeing people practicing what they love to do, regardless of it's traditional, or if you want to bring in your own style and kind of blend it in a good fusion way. I just think we need to keep moving. We need to keep moving forward. We need to keep getting inspired, and we need to keep that fire burning. Like, don't let that fire burn out. So with that, thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate it. I'm going to end with a hoop dance, and I probably won't be able to talk after the hoop dance, so I'll end it right now. Hi, thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Are we on? Are we live? Yay, there I am. Hey, guys. Thank you so much, James. That was absolutely inspiring, motivating. You just make my heart come out of my chest with all those beautiful word medicine that you just gave us. So thank you so much for that and all the energy and effort you put in for our community. So welcome to have you here. So hey guys, we're gonna get started on the discussion, and I've got my friend and partner sitting right across from me. I wanna introduce Kyle from the Build Native program with Shopify. So what an amazing, amazing group of people that have come here to help us out with this event. So for me as a small business owner, a native business owner, having to have a Build Native part of a larger e-commerce that's actually here to help guide us, to teach us, to help us as young entrepreneurs and older entrepreneurs be able to build the most important thing we need to on those platforms, which is our economy. How can we thrive in business? How can we take steps into this space and actually really be able to tell our stories? So Shopify has been such an amazing tool for my brand and my business in order to be able to express that, to be able to run a small business and wear a lot of hats and have all the technology that's created in those programs help support both my e-commerce store and my store here in Santa Fe. So I just want to say thank you so much, and I'd love for you to just say a couple words about the amazing work you do.
I mean, thank you so much for inviting me. Obviously, this means a lot to me. When Amy was describing that this would be like a family vibe, I took it a little literal, and I brought my cousin here from Kitigan-Zibi-Inishbeg, just over there. But yeah, for all you who don't know me, I'm the senior leader of Indigenous Entrepreneurship at Shopify. I am Algonquin Anishinaabe from Kitigan-Zibi-Inishbeg First Nation, which is my home community. Which is, I spend probably now a good fourth of my year there. This is probably the hottest I've been comparative to where I grew up. But I'm incredibly privileged to be invited into this space and to also host everybody in this, and just for the amazing panelists for participating in. And really, entrepreneurship was such an incredible part of my life. I owned a streetwear company for about 4 or 5 years, and then from that, got a job at Shopify, and then from then, being a res kid, wanting to, empower those tools or share those tools that I got from entrepreneurship with other people was always my main motivator. So starting this initiative where I only focus on native business, it was always an incredible drive for me. And then I, sometimes have to pinch myself that I get to sit here in places like this with some of the most cool, creative, talented native folks from all over Turtle Island. It's pretty surreal right now. So yeah, thank you, Amy, for inviting me, and yeah.
We're so honored to have you here and the whole team here. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun weekend. So I wanna start the discussion off by introducing our amazing panelists, coming from really all over Turtle Island, representing all different areas of design and creativity. So yeah, I'm gonna start off with Alejandro, who's visiting us from Portland. It's a brand called Gracieros and Gutierrez, based out of Portland, but working with beautiful, beautiful hand-woven textiles from our relatives in the South. So Alejandro's here really representing, working together with those artisan craftsmen, bringing it back and actually designing within a space where he's creating bespoke, sustainable, and beautifully crafted clothing. We're gonna have some of that at our shop today, so we're so honored to have you here. Yeah.
Yeah. Next is Jennifer. If you've ever spent any time in the Vancouver area or on the West Coast in general, Jennifer is a legend, I would say. Somebody who mixes the beauty of farmland design with like incredibly detailed metal work. I told you this before, but I'm gonna tell you again. I'm a big fan. Been a fan for years. But yeah, so honored to have you here with us.
I'm a huge, huge fan. I can't wait to go back and see the beautiful pieces that were brought to the shop. So next up is Dior Greenwood, my relative from Navajo Nation. We've done a lot of work within the skate culture area and community area, but I am so darn proud because a month ago, Dior launched the very first shoe collaboration with Nike. and get a little emotional because it was such a major thing for our nation to see how beautifully executed that was and to see so many relatives come together for that. So we're just so proud of her as well. Last year, she was one of the first artists to be featured in the art of skateboarding as a stamp for the US postage. So we were all like mailing out our letters and mailing out all of our business stuff, being able to feature some of the artwork from our tribe. So it's just amazing to have her part of the discussion because she not only designs her own bespoke pieces within skateboarding art and woodburn pieces, but she's also working in the corporate space with Carver Skateboards. We just did a collaboration that launched in May, so within the hard goods area, but also in the footwear area with working with Nike. So just so honored to have you here today, dear.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously, last but not least, Hud Oberly. I'd say that, all around creative with incredible work that focuses on youth and empowerment of youth through creativity. Hud has an incredible brand called Here's to You. Also has been involved in many other Native-owned brands, but is just such an incredible advocate and creative in general. And thanks for joining us.
Okay, so we're going to get started with some amazing questions. So our panel discussion today is actually talking about what is the Indigenous future? And if you guys got the invite, it's Indigenous Futures forever. Because we don't feel like we're trying to get someplace. We kind of all feel like we're here in the present, we're here in the moment. We're already wherever we're trying to get to. And it's really just celebrating that creative space of being really grounded in the now, but also just thinking, like, where's this all going with fashion? Where's this all going with our creative energy going out into the world, both in Native communities and in non-Native communities that are actually participating in the things we make and the things that we put out there as products. So the discussion today is just to explore some new topics that we feel have been brought up. People come in my shop all the time and ask me questions. I hear conversations of young people that are also at the shop. So we just wanted to open up that space, first of all, to be asking the panelist discussion, and then after that, we'll do some Q&A. So I'm going to start off with the very first question. Let me find the right. I don't have my reading glasses on today, so you guys are going to have to put up with the 60-year-old lady up here. Okay, so the very first question when we're talking about expanding creative horizons, how do you approach the balance between honoring your cultural heritage and exploring themes that may not be directly tied to your Indigenous identity? So I'm going to give that question to Jennifer.
Thank you. I was thinking about that question, of course. And in the work that I do, I feel like I always have to represent where I'm from and who I am. It just gives meaning to what I do. And so I really try to bridge the gap between the question that I think we talked about yesterday that you get asked a lot, and I get asked is, can I wear that if I'm not Native? And so the pieces that I make, I want to honor my heritage by doing proper form line. It may be a different, not a clan design. I don't use any clan designs that belong to families. And I make pieces that can be worn by anyone. And if I'm selling something, it's for anyone to wear. I wouldn't sell something that, belongs to a clan or a clan crest. When I'm making pieces, I'm always thinking about, am I honoring my ancestors? Am I honoring what came before me? No matter what I put out there and where it's going, if it's going to be made for anyone to wear, for me, it still has to have that heart. And that's just my own personal way of working. I've had people ask me to, and this is maybe a little bit off that topic, but can you find a way to produce more? But I like to make everything handmade. And it comes, there's always that energy that goes into each piece. But as far as I just always have to have something related to who I am being put into that. If that
That's
makes
beautiful.
sense.
I almost feel like I think it's something that we can all relate to is that moment when you're like in it, right? That moment when we're all, it's almost like a meditation as we're creating. Because you're like in it and you're holding that space with all those that came before you. And it's like, it's just like coming out in this creative form whenever Dior is burning skateboards or you're actually physically making jewelry. You know, it's like these moments of carrying that space with our ancestors that are guiding us. And so I feel like it's almost for me, in my creative experience, it's like I'm almost in a meditative moment and holding that space as I'm creating. So I don't know if anybody else has that feeling when they're actually in that moment, when you're designing or you're sewing or you're on those marketing calls. Like, how does that feel when you're in that moment as well? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that really leads into the next one, which is like, you're talking about that flow state of creativity and everything like that. And I wonder if anyone could describe and share an example of a design or a project where you felt free to express yourself without the expectation of representing your culture. I'll have you start, Hud.
Can you say that one more time? Question.
Yeah, like, can you give us an example or of a design project where you felt free to express yourself without an expectation of representing culture?
Yeah, definitely. My brand that you mentioned before in my intro, Here's to You, is kind of like that project. It's like, it's not indigenous specific. It's not specific for one tribe. I come from the Osage, Caddo, and Comanche people of Oklahoma. But, you know, I when people ask like what communities I'm from, I mention those: Osage, Caddo, Comanche. I'm an Oklahoman, born in Oklahoma, raised there. But I'm also like, I love going to I'm a big city person. I'm an artist. So I represent all of those communities. And sometimes it depends on the project, like which one is the focus. So Here's to You is about intertwining with today's artists and being relatable to the artists of today and convincing everyone they're creative in some capacity, under the belief that believing you're creative gives you confidence to make decisions and go about your day, whether that's being creative in how you handle interpersonal relationships or just how you schedule your day. So when I create for Here's to You, I have those meditative moments because when I first started the brand, I was doing a lot of sewing myself. And, you know, in those crafts, and I don't know, maybe this is not just the indigenous community, but, you know, you want to think good thoughts when you make those things and you're creating these pieces. And if it's, you know, made to order, which some of those I did, you know who those pieces are going to. And so you definitely want to have good thoughts. And that's something I've heard other artists talk about too, like some of my friends that are weavers, they put a lot of good thoughts into it, and that goes with the garment or with the item. So Here's to You as a collective is not just about my Osage background, but my Osage values and the way I was raised come through in how I operate the business and all my projects within the business. And also, sorry, shout out to Shopify. Here's to You has been a Shopify brand since the beginning.
I didn't pay him to say that.
And you had mentioned like a project that you don't feel the responsibility. I was thinking about that too, and I can't think, I always feel a responsibility. And whether, like you said, it's like how you present it. Also, I don't know, there wasn't anything. Everything I do, I'm always thinking like, they're watching me.
Yeah.
My ancestors are watching me, and like, am I doing the right thing? Is it, so it's always there, I think, for me.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of putting it. I love everything that you just did in explaining the brand, because I think it opens that discussion of being able to hold your culture so tight, but still be able to build brand platforms that are more expansive. And I think, that's something for me is like, when we define what is or isn't Indigenous fashion, right? It's like opening up a door to even a broader space in what you've done, because you're creating for both native and non-native worlds within that brand. You're really just inviting everybody into that and holding a safe space for them to be able to purchase it. Because again, it goes back to the question we all get asked, is it appropriate for me to wear this from our non-native customers? And I think that's just part of, being able to be in that space, to be great representation, but also being able to be good educators to people as well with the product that we're putting out. and moving into new spaces. And to be honest, it is really scary sometimes because you want to do the right thing, but you want to be experimental, and then you're always just like, going back to some of James's discussion, you're always just sitting there like questioning yourself a lot because it's scary to move into new spaces. It's really scary. But yeah, it's just really holding that space. So the next group of questions is going to be about breaking stereotypes. So my first question for Alessandro, what challenges have you faced in breaking free from the expectation that Indigenous art and fashion must always reflect traditional symbols or themes?
Yeah, this is a question that was kind of like at the forefront of the conversations that I held with the families that I work with, both in Oaxaca and in Chiapas. And we very soon realized that like the most important thing that we could do was focusing on kind of like preserving and honoring the rich cultural heritage that both Mexico and its native cultures have. Keep that at the forefront of everything that we're making, whether it is like pants and jackets and shirts and like textiles, and kind of like keeping the artisans' work at the forefront. And I feel like, you know, when we first started working together, like the brand that I'm running, we're kind of like working with these families that have been hand-woven textiles on petal looms and working with natural dyes, and we're sheep wool from Oaxaca for about like 60 to 70 years. And there's an expectation of what these textiles should be, and these textiles have mostly just been for home goods and like curtains and linens and like tablecloths. And our conversation was, how can we bring a more unique and personal use? Yeah. And how can we make it exciting and make it innovative and kind of like get some of the younger generations excited about being able to learn how to work the petal loom, how to work a backstrap loom, and how to be able to at least like preserve all the weaving techniques. And you know, there is an expectation of what indigenous cultures and like textiles should be, and I feel that what we're doing is trying to break those expectations. Yep. And break those barriers and show that you can preserve the rich cultural heritage and the history that there is while still creating something unique and personal, and kind of like implementing kind of like what we're doing is bringing kind of like a Western look into like incorporating these textiles into workwear. And showing that, you know, this textile can be laying on your table as a tablecloth, but you can also make something that will last a lifetime and will give like a new meaning to kind of like your work.
Yeah. Beautiful answer to that. It's almost like it becomes a wearable heirloom.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I consider it artware because I love the fabrics from the region. You work so much. There's like, I look at the intricacy of the patterns and the beautiful way that those things are still made. And after seeing your collection, it was just so innovative to see taking those fabrics, which like you said, were curtains, were other things, and they're now completely wearable on these silhouettes that anyone can wear.
Yes, and that was kind of like the purpose of making them more accessible.
Yep.
Just because after I spent about a year working alongside Zapotecan and Mayan folks in both the Yucatan and Oaxaca, and one of the biggest issues was most of the weavers tend to be the elderly folks in the community. And a lot of the younger people were not really interested in working with the textiles, learning how to work with the natural dyes, and kind of like the whole purpose is how can we just make it a bit more exciting and kind of like bring a bit more interest, and trying not to allow kind of like Western culture to just fully take over. Because it's the most important thing is kind of like preserving the weaving techniques. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's so experimental what you're doing with the fabrics that I think that's really kind of what we're talking about, is taking something that is so tied to traditional craft, but finding ways to like move it forward in new and interesting ways, but still really hold the space for the beauty of that fiber.
Yes.
So.
And something that got brought up before is the question at the beginning when I first started. It was a question that I would get frequently of people not necessarily feeling very comfortable with wearing the garment because the textile, they're like, oh, I'm not indigenous or native, or I don't have a real attachment to the textile, so how can I preserve it or honor it or make sure that I'm aware of what went into the textile and the whole making of the garment. So that's kind of like part of the storytelling that we're trying to like continuously do, and continuously, like, I pretty much cut and I sew everything myself. And everything we're doing is made to order. That way, people can like know where the textiles are coming from. I can tell them like the story of like the patterns. Also, the textiles are fully unchanged, and that was very important because there's a lot of people that can come in and be like, "Oh, can you change the color and the palettes and change like the weaving textures?" And the most important thing was to make sure that like these textiles stay true to what these communities and indigenous families have been doing for centuries.
Yep.
And it's just, how can I just take what you've been doing and that has been created and successful and beautiful, and just give it like my new, unique, and like personal take, while still honoring and preserving what, you know, the textile and the history of it.
Beautiful.
Yeah, love that.
Love it. Yep.
So next question would be, how do you navigate external pressures to conform to certain stereotypes about indigenous creativity? I'll ask that of you, Dior.
Hello, everybody. A way that I'm able to kind of navigate those external pressures to conform to the idealism of what indigenous artwork should be is just having that simple reminder of each one of our predecessors are masters of adaptation, and all through, you know, existence, it was just adapt in order to make sure that we are sitting here today, you know, and to be masters of that, to be a grandchild of a master of somebody like that, you know, it's just kind of easy to deal with those external pressures because we're holding the knowledge, but you know, they expect us to take that knowledge and adapt it to the new generation, to get the youth excited about it, and to really modernize what we're able to do to keep it sustainable, to keep it available to our communities, and just, yeah, so I would think, you know, just moving about in this world and with these expectations, with that simple reminder of like, we're children of these masters of adaptation. So.
Yeah, it's almost like being traditional is constantly adapting for like a long-term longevity of those pieces. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, listening to everybody else up here, the key thing that I really love is everyone's thinking about the next generation. And I feel like that's what's driving me too, is to try to do a more contemporary style. Because I want the youth and the next generation to carry on as well. So it's so cool to hear everybody say kind of the same thing. And I'm like, I could so relate to all of you.
I love this conversation because I think it's such an important one about like what's considered indigenous fashion or indigenous art, because in my work experience, I've worked at Sundance Film Festival, where there's like a conversation around like who's allowed to tell indigenous stories. Is it non-native directors? Is it only native directors? And then working as a creative director for Urban Native Era, we have all these like the same question, like can you wear this? Am I allowed to wear the You're on Native Land design? And then if we design something intentionally no indigenous motifs or symbols, people still ask, and it's just like constantly. And I think, you know, my opinion may differ from you guys as far as the external pressures, but to me, the external pressure should come completely second, almost last, to what that individual artist wants to make. Because why can't, you know, an indigenous artist tell a rom-com that doesn't have the indigenous like main through line?
Yep.
Why can't someone make clothing that doesn't have to have a indigenous thing? And there has to be people everywhere, people carrying on tradition, but also people like taking up space in the spaces that aren't just indigenous or aren't just for BIPOC or aren't just all these specific maybe places we aren't. We have to be everywhere. So I think, you know, and even back to thinking about our ancestors and our elders, what I've told some people that have come to me for mentoring is that, you know, they felt the pressure to do something in their community, but there was just something holding them back. And I told them, you know, your ancestors, your elders that are telling you these things, they've done a lot of sacrificing and been very resilient to get you the freedom to do whatever you want. And yes, they may tell you like, hey, you know, come back and work for the tribe and do this role or this position, come run for council or whatever it is. But they're going to be the happiest when they see you the happiest. And that's what's the most important thing. And maybe that is, you know, you beating, or maybe it's, you know, you being a CEO for a corporate like company. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think it's all about the individual artist's happiness. Of course, we want tradition to be carried on, but we have to have people everywhere.
Yeah. Man, that was powerful. Yeah, that just like opens up like so many more questions for us. And I think it just like for me, I immediately seen what was a smaller box becoming a giant, huge container, right? Because it just expands our possibilities within creative fields whenever we can think outside of just one space and one lane. You open up a lane highway that way of all different ways we can enter different creative fields and thrive as Indigenous peoples, as Native peoples. So I'm going to start with the next question, which is really about just that, creative freedom and our identity. I'm going to ask this of Hud and Jennifer. How does your Indigenous identity influence your work when you're not explicitly centering your culture in your designs? So really working in that new space, that new open space of experimental.
Okay. So I love this question, and I, you know, all these questions kind of get talked about a lot. But my, you know, like I mentioned in one of the first things I said was, you know, I was raised around my Caddo and Osage and Comanche traditions. I'd say mostly around my Osage traditions, going back for our Elonchka dances every summer. But our Elonchka dances are very strict and structured. There's certain times for everything, and you know, a lot of our traditions are like that. But there's strict things. You're supposed to wear things a certain way. You wear your feather on the right side versus the left side, and it depends within what group within the tribe you come from how you wear things. And those are the things I was raised on, and that's how I operate my business. That's how I operate my life. And so I see if I create, you know, a vest that has it's a very minimal vest, but it's canvas and there's no Indigenous like story behind it. My upbringing and me making it makes it Indigenous fashion. My Osage values that I was raised on are in that piece that's not explicitly Indigenous. And that's why I think, you know, there doesn't have to be a pressure where it has to be like right in front of you. You can carry your traditions from your tribe, and it can come through in how you operate your business or the systems you have and how you operate a team, or how you like, you know, maybe sit in a circle when you have meetings, or however it is. That's still indigeneity coming through. And growing up, you know, in high school, like many of us, maybe you sometimes, well, I grew up in a predominantly white kind of neighborhood or city in high school. And sometimes you don't want to be different. But HUD is short for Hadiba, which is my Caddo name, which means someone you look up to. So I was never going to escape that. My name and who I am is just Indigenous. And so that's what comes through anything I do, is me operating as an Indigenous person in that daily life.
I love that. I love the fact that, you know, like you said, you don't have to put anything on what you're making, but you're taking up that space, and that is very important. For me personally, when I make pieces, you know, sometimes I like to play around, and I really love to do floral designs, because that a lot of people, non-Indigenous, are okay with the floral patterns. You know, they don't ask, and that's one way to reach a broader audience and hopefully draw them into what I make and what I create. But for me, I'm really, like, I started doing jewelry about 12 or 13 years ago, and it was really important to me to kind of, you know, I looked at what the metal engravers did from my area before me, and I thought I had to replicate that. You know, if I was going to be doing silver work or copper work, I thought I had to replicate what they were doing. And I was like, no, I want the next generation, you know, to look at it in a different way and not feel like they're wearing something from the past. I wanted it to be carried forward. So I just made a decision early on that I wanted to, incorporate form line design, and the importance of the form line that I try to honor every time I make something with form line is it has a proper balance and flow. So I do the best that I can to honor that, but then I try to make pieces that are more contemporary. And I just always had this like goal in mind of reaching as far as I can, because early in my career, I had like a gallery owner tell me that the artists from Alaska don't really promote themselves, and because she was selling art in Northwest Coast art in Seattle area, and she's like, a lot of the artists up there don't really like share. They're very humble. And I was like, well, I think I'm humble, but once she told me that, I was like, okay, I just got to go for it, and I just got to reach as far as I can, because I wanted to reach a broad audience with Northwest Coast style art to show that, we are still here and still very relevant and making very relevant things. So, that's what is important to me personally.
Yeah, I think so much of a lot of that really touches on just like trying to confront the box that oftentimes is imposition onto us. And I think like what I've sort of felt for a while is that there's a kind of like a evolving recognition of the diversity we have within the Native community, and the reality in which that like individual expression within those traditions is a place that's, for a while, I think a lot of people were getting a lot of flack for it, for not fitting into oftentimes what was like a white lens on indigeneity. But now you're having the ability to create with that and all that, and then find audiences within your own community who connect with it because it feels like it matches their current expression. And I think all of you have kind of spoken to almost exactly that thing.
Could I touch on that a little?
Please.
Okay. And also it's like a really rad reminder to, like kind of bringing back to HUD's analogy of like when you make something, you don't necessarily need to put a geometric pattern design work on it to necessarily tell a story. And the reason for that is because the way that you are allowed to sew or do carpentry, like those are skill sets that made its way through your DNA through time, and just having those skill sets alone comes from an ancient time, and then to be gifted with that in the present, just to make something, to bring something out of existence in that's enough. And that's what I want to tell the Native youth and Indigenous youth across, is like that is enough to just hold on to those skill sets, and to cultivate that old it's timeless. Skill sets are timeless across the generations, and I think we forget that a lot.
Yeah, I think that message needs to be shared more to empower more people to just try because half the stunting I think sometimes comes from the imposition we put on ourselves in our own mind, and half of it is trying to finally connect to a message that exists out there so that you feel like you can go out there and feel empowered to go and do that.
And to call back on James, like that's what I feel like he did, with b-boying and then the traditional work and then finding his own path. And I think that's exactly what kind of just made me think of that when you said that.
Yeah, on that point, for you, Alejandro, in what ways do you feel empowered to create art and fashion that reflects your personal experience rather than a cultural expectation?
Just going back a little bit to what you all were saying, I love the idea of being able to create something that doesn't necessarily have to have like a geometric pattern or like something like symbolic like that, because I feel like sometimes we can get really caught up with wanting to like represent our culture and heritage, but can forget to also represent ourselves and who we have become and where our inspiration to even start sewing or creating something came from. You can definitely honor your cultural heritage while at the same time figuring out how can you represent yourself and your current views. I grew up in Mexico, in the Yucatan, and I left when I was around 14. And this project for me was a way to reconnect with my cultural heritage, and a way to figure out how can I bring back kind of like what I've learned being in the United States and kind of like going to like a pretty Western fashion school and getting exposed to all these Western ideas. And I fell in love with just workwear in general, whether it was like Americana workwear or kind of like military design and whatnot that is very utilitarian. And that was a conversation that I had with the families when I was down in Mexico, where I was like, how can we transform these textiles and make it into something that is long-lasting, but also utilitarian. And it can be worn every single day. Anybody can wear it. And trying to break that barrier between, oh, this is like an indigenous garment with an indigenous textile, or it's just a garment honoring the heritage. But at the same time, you see it from afar, and it will call your attention. And there is like a rich cultural kind of like history behind it as well. So like the project was a way of like blending my personal experience, which was just in like a Western school in the United States, learning about like contemporary fashion and figuring out how to incorporate these handwoven textiles into contemporary fashion in a way that is kind of like original and stays true to the artisans' work and their heritage, but at the same time is true to like my own vision, and to be able to kind of like combine both at the same time. Yeah.
It's always a balance, right?
Yes.
It's always for all of us balancing both sides, and as we design and as we put stuff out in the world. The next question I'm going to ask is actually for any of you that want to answer this. What advice would you give? Because we're all kind of maybe 5, 10, 20. I'm at 40 years in the business. Like, what advice would you give this younger generation coming in after the experiences you've had of getting to where you're at in your businesses? Like, what advice, what do you wish, this is always like that question, what would you tell your 18-year-old self as you're entering, the businesses that we're all in, which is creating products and selling them in markets, hopefully globally in the future, if not already. So, Dior. What advice would you give to your younger self if you'd look back and said, oh, gosh, I wish somebody had kind of steered me on that?
I think the advice I'd probably give to my younger self is to be extremely patient, because we're going to have to unlearn a lot of things that were learned in order to take in new information. And, that takes time, and it's not something that when I was younger, I felt like it needed to be understood thoroughly right at that moment, and I feel like it took away from a lot of the creative process, forcing myself to understand, a dramatic change in worlds, and I definitely wasn't patient with myself, and, I definitely feel like that would be the advice I would give, is just be patient, because unlearning things to learn things will take time, and just as each of the seasons, Mother Nature poses as a dramatic example of what it means to take time and to bloom, to have your seasons, to drop your petals, and then to regrow. And all of that, the key common denominator between Earth and us is just time. It takes time. So just to be patient, I would say.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
I think the advice I would give, I need to take the patient's advice, would be build community and network.
Yep.
And it's not a competition. I know that when I started out, I would see what other people in the metalwork were doing, and I would be like, oh, whoa, what are they doing? Look, I need to try that. Or it just I had a kind of there was this little sense of I have to, fit in and belong, and I found that just doesn't work. You have to focus on yourself and do what comes, to your heart. And so, don't be competitive. We all are unique, and we all have our own styles, even if we're in the same field, whatever that might be. And just networking and building community, I think, is very important.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Younger HUD, just say, keep going, brother. That's all I got. I don't know, I'm very silver lining, positive guy. So like,
Yeah.
I'm grateful for where I'm at, the experiences I've had, good and bad. So I don't know if I would tell him to change anything. Just keep going.
My biggest advice that I would give that I've learned is not being afraid to fail.
Yeah.
And just making sure you take chances and risks. Today, like I feel that we're so exposed to, like on social media, what like everybody's doing, and sometimes it can feel overwhelming that people are like getting ahead, but you really never know what people are going through. And you just have to make sure that like you try and put product or whatever it is that you're trying to make out there. And failure is the biggest teacher.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. I think, it's all scary for all of us to try new things and fail. But I feel as kind of innovators, you have to be prepared for that. You have to be prepared to push in and expect to have a pushback. So I think it's so important that we build communities where we can support each other as we're evolving, and having spaces like, Build Native for Shopify, having a space even on a platform that will help us be able to expand in new areas. Like, I love the idea that we're all here for NDN Market here in Santa Fe, but I also love the idea that we're gonna have dinners tonight and do different things and talk about like, how can we be global? How are we all gonna do that? Because it's coming. We're all gonna be expanding in these new markets, and it's not just gonna be even the US market that we're navigating. It's going to be the global market as we all start connecting with other partners around the world through indigenous creativity. And it's going to be an exciting time the next years because everything's on the rise, everything's like blasting up. And, it's going to be an exciting time and space to see evolution, to see innovation, to see scary brand new things, and to have some things work and have some things fail. But we're all going to grow as artists in that process, right? And it's going to move the whole community forward when those things all happen. So it's really holding that space.
Yeah, totally. That's like the number one advice I give is it's also recognizing where the markers of failure are really self-imposed. Like oftentimes you have your vision of where you want to be, and feeling like you didn't reach that is ultimately self-imposed failure. But that's not accurate because it's not actually giving credit to the full journey of it, which is what you acquire while doing it all, which is what makes it worthwhile.
Yep.
And if you have a community to do it with, you have the constant set of support. But it's really trying to shift that mindset from just trying to do it and learning from everything, and recognizing that you put the idea of failure in your own mind often based on how you're interpreting the world around you, as opposed to trying something, learning, and then continuing on the journey to sort of onto the next thing, and then eventually just sort of evolving and changing it. And I think so much of that is, obviously a sense of community or feeling of empowerment, or that there's like a safe environment to fail.
Yep.
That's a big one. Oftentimes that's what I try to do, is try to create safe spaces to fail so that people could learn and learn from each other. So what somebody else did, what might have not worked, where you could take that from. And the people who have found success, or quote unquote success, where they have these incredible teachings to kind of share down, and it could all spread amongst each other. So,
Right on. Absolutely right on.
I changed my answer. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
you changed your answer now?
Keep going, HUD, but find mentors. Because I think,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's great to fail,
yeah.
for sure, but you may be able to avoid some failure. And I don't think I ever, came across mentors or had one in the direct like art fashion space. I think I had mentors in the professional networking and, Indian country space, but not
Yep.
specifically art and fashion in the craft. So
Yeah.
find mentors, I think, is a big thing.
Absolutely. I always tell my daughter, it's like, make sure you feel uncomfortable at least once a day. Because if we're not moving into that space of trying something kind of outside the box, then we're not going to grow as artists. And to know that we all have each other is always a great space, is, again, going back to creating community. When everybody has some sort of way to support, we all jump in. But I think it's a really beautiful way to do that. So I'm actually going to open up for questions from the outside as well. So I think probably the best way to navigate this one is if I walk around. Does anybody have any questions for the panel? I'm going to come back to you. Oh, you got it? Oh, you got it? Okay, cool. Thanks.
Well, you did it. You made me uncomfortable today, so the rest of the day should be a breeze, right?
I think we're all uncomfortable. I'm like an introvert, so this is really hard too.
It's just hot.
I think this is on. Okay.
Yeah. We're all getting a free sauna up here.
First, thank you so much for this panel. It's been really interesting and inspiring to listen to you all. One of the questions that I have, and I have a background in mass producing furniture and that type of business, and I'm wondering, with the advancement of technology and materials, how do you all envision yourself going towards a global market and keeping your traditions, your weaving, all the different avenues that you go down and putting it into the new technology of this fabric? How do you see that? How do you see yourself maintaining your tradition?
Panel?
I'll have a short answer, kind of. With my work, I get asked the question, even specifically last night, I had someone approach me and ask about, like, have I thought about how to kind of like mass produce what I make, and just to have a line of jewelry that is a little more accessible. There's something about it for me, and like we all create differently and have, but for me, I like to touch every piece, and I like to share that every piece is handmade and one of a kind. So for me personally, you know, like I know there's other jewelers that are doing, I don't know, like laser cut, you know, metals or just some other stuff like that. And it's beautiful work, but it's not me. So that's how I approach it, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm going to say, Dior, like, how do you feel about that? Because we just did a Carver skateboard collaboration where we started with this phenomenal woodburn pattern that Dior created, but then that moved into a more commercial space of creating a larger production. Still small batch, but still larger.
I think if we're being given these tools and these tools are being, a lot more accessible, it's our duty to, bring those tools to our community easily and then have our community involved in that kind of grand scaling of, what we want to do. So if I can't touch that skateboard product, I know that someone from my community, one day that's the goal, is to have like that skill building center where my community can, intern there and be able to learn what it takes to cultivate that carpentry, whether it's cedarwood flutes or skateboards. It's a really, one-to-one process. It's like you're shaping the skateboard or you're shaping the flute. There's no real way to get away from, kind of making it all automated. Like, you have to kind of still keep with those traditions when you make either a skateboard or a flute. And I feel like the only way with the advancement of new tools is, hey, if these new tools are saving time and cutting costs, then what will it take to bring, this to my community so I can have my community involved in this advancement of tools so they can gain that skill set?
Yeah, beautiful answer. And I'll just answer that as maybe somebody like that has worked in corporate fashion and also now works more in small batch. My hope for the future is that we see more and more of our young people entering into textile design space, right? And that all comes with the equality that we need to have, that space that we can actually get into FIT, Parsons, all those different schools. So we have a lot of work to do in order to make sure those are available options for all of these multidisciplinary artists that we all know. There's like so many talented people that just haven't been able to enter that space yet because they haven't gotten into those schools. So as I've met with the schools, it's clear to me that there's just a lot of work to be done to make sure that there's a bridge built to those spaces so we can enter textile design in the future and actually be able to tell our own stories with that innovative equipment and fibers and everything being developed. So yeah, that's a big push that we have in 2025. Okay, do we have another question out there? Great. Hey.
Hi, Native. Good morning, everybody. I just had a question about apprenticeship and mentorship. HUD's one of the mentors, I think, with the nonprofit that I work for, New Mexico Community Capital. So I'm representing them, but I'm also representing a lot of other youth and up-and-coming artists, creatives that are seeking apprenticeships but are afraid to ask for them. And I just want to know what your approach is to, I guess, accepting an apprentice or becoming a mentor if you see yourself taking on that role.
Yeah, I mean, personal, I don't know. Everyone has preferences on how they're approached with different questions, but I'm always open on like DMs. I'll like try to answer all the questions I get through there. But I think when people have asked, I want to gauge their passion, their drive, their commitment, because people have asked and then, you know, something has come up and then like things like drop. And I think a lot of mentors will kind of gauge that and like maybe something falls through, but do you like propose other times to meet? Like how bad do you want to meet, you know? And I don't know, that's my point of view. Like I want to see some commitment. I don't want to be, you know, forcing a mentorship onto someone. So I think it's just resilience. And, you know, I think people may think I don't want to be annoying. I don't want to like bother them, but you know, you bother them enough, they'll understand how committed you are.
Yeah. Beautiful.
I'll just kind of
Anybody
back
else?
that up too, is, and this kind of goes along with the advice. It's not necessarily about mentorship, but just don't be afraid to ask. That's what I tell my kids, and that's what I feel like I always push myself to reach out to somebody, and just don't be afraid to ask. The worst that can happen is they'll say no, and then you move on to the next door kind of thing.
Yeah. But thank you so much for that question, because it is something where we need to find a way to open up more discussion on how to make that accessible to everyone. You know, Jake's here from New Mexico Capital. I just came out of a hackathon for Native Women's Led. So there's a lot of Native organizations that are creating space of support. But I think you're absolutely right. We need to find a way to make that more connected and more viable so people know how to find their way into that. But great question. Anyone else out there? Yay! Here, I'll run to you.
Just so everyone hears the question, you all have a really nice style. This is more lighthearted in the sense that I just wanted to compliment you all, and if you have a good piece that you're wearing today that's your favorite, and if it's got a little story, I'm curious. You guys got some nice style.
Who wants to answer that? Alejandro. What are these
yeah, well-
shoes? Oh my God.
I know. This is the first shirt I actually ever sewed, and it's the first textile that I picked up back in 2017 in Oaxaca, and it's kind of like become like the staple textile like that represents like what the family embodies and like their colorways and their patterns, and I've used it in like pants and jackets and in shirts. But yeah, this is like one of my favorite shirts, and I hold it very dear just because I learned how to sew a shirt making this shirt, so it's like falling apart. I've like repaired it several times, but yeah, the shirt.
Thanks, Ty. That's really nice. I'd say this bracelet is actually beaded from an Osage relative of mine. We went on a trip in high school, like Osage high school students, to DC and learn about the political system and stuff. But neither of us are in political stuff now. But yeah, she beaded this for me, and in our Osage ways, we have a giveaway day, and she now has 2 kids, but my family has given away blankets to her kids as they're just like kind of coming into our dances, and so it's just like a mutual thing within our family to give gifts. And she sent me to this to me while I was in Brooklyn, and now if I'm wearing red, I'll usually try to wear it so it all matches.
Thanks, Ty. I'm wearing an engraved butterfly piece today. I was creating last year for Indigenous Fashion Arts show that came up in June. And I had a whole different plan when I got accepted to do the runway show there. I had a whole different idea of what I was going to do. And last fall, I lost my stepmom and 2 uncles in a very short amount of time. And it was around the time that I had to start actually making stuff. And my stepmom gave me this really beautiful butterfly painting that she had done. And before she passed, I had asked her if I could use that and make a formline design. And I just found that creating, it kind of changed my path. And so for that collection, I did a lot of butterfly pieces to represent her and honor her. And so it just really helped kind of process the grief too as I'm making these things, because I get so much joy and it's so therapeutic for me when I am creating. So yeah, that's what I'm wearing.
I would like to kind of share appreciation for the pants. I was picked up by a clothing sponsor, and she makes all of her clothing in small batches, but she told me early on, like, hey, if you have a lot of clothes, and being a skateboarder, you know, I'm always going for the best bargain. And so that necessarily means like they missed a stitch here and there in the seams. But when she gave me, you know, my first set of pants, that she was like, I want to sponsor you, even though like I know you're going to skate in this and this is not normal, but you can test this clothing for me. And, you know, she told me that quality over quantity is going to be very visible with, you know, what she kind of sponsors me with. And since then, like, I hadn't been, you know, clothes shopping for pants, even though I'm skating and what I'm wearing, it's held up through time. And that's very, you know, eye-opening for me. Like, okay, you don't need an abundance of materialistic things. You just need quality made items with items that, you know, the artisan or the designer thoroughly thought through. Like, I want this to be a testament through time. So I'm really appreciative of, you know, this lady's vision and her being able to kind of give me a bit of confidence and wrap me in confidence with the pants that I have, because, yeah, they've lasted through the years, all the falls and all.
I love that. Yeah, I have, I mean, the beaded medallions from Running Fox Beads, one of the most talented, I think, beaders in Toronto. And then the other thing I've been kind of obsessed with is, like, for being Algonquin and Anishinaabe from my community, is that we don't have that many businesses that make clothes. So what I started realizing being into like vintage wear in general is that there's like these random counties in America that are named Algonquin that I found out about. So one of my favorite things to do is like literally find things labeled Algonquin on eBay. So this belt buckle is literally from like some county in Illinois. This ring, apparently, there used to be a high school in upstate New York called Algonquin. So just finding these random pieces to kind of reappropriate it and be like the actual expression of what that word, you know, really means. So for me, that's like more of a very specific thing, but I love finding that for me, is you just kind of like are taking it back to what it's actually supposed to represent. But.
Beautiful. Well, I think we're going to have to.
Amy, what's yours?
Oh, mine?
Oh,
well,
yes.
Of course, when of you guys have not seen me in a flight suit, I'm in this suit because I slept at the shop last night, because, you know, it's Indian Market, guys. It's like 24/7. So I'm in my pajamas today, just feeling all cozy and a little overheated. But yeah, I just want to say thanks to everyone that's been part of this discussion. I'm just so inspired because I just want to do this more. Because everything that you guys said, I'm like learning so much, and it's making me even rethink about my business and about how, you know, we all evolve into the next year. So just want to say thanks to that, and we're going to get you guys out of the heat. So thanks for being in our sauna up here on the. We ask for no rain, so this is what happens when you ask for no rain. You get a lot of sun. So yeah, so thank you, everybody. So a round of applause to our amazing creatives up here. Yes.